In the woodshed. I'm glad you all found it. Delighted to be joined today by Lynn Cassells, who's got a fascinating story to tell us about her journey to Scotland. Lynn studied archaeology, and then went on to be a ranger for the National Trust. And then she and her partner decided to follow their dreams, jack all that in, and go and buy a croft up in the Cairngorms in Scotland. So can you tell us a little bit about how that decision came about and what was the driving force behind wanting to do that, make that massive move?
Well, firstly, before I do that, thank you so much for everybody that's here. It's one of those situations whenever you're doing an event like this that you're terrified that it's just going to be the two of us. So I'm delighted to see you all here. You've made my day, so thank you. Yeah, come in, keep coming. So why did we, jack in our kind of jobs to move north? Really, I guess there was a few things going on. We were living just outside Maidenhead in the southeast of England, living and working for the National Trust, which, you know, was kind of quite a nice job, but it just felt really busy. You know, there was a lot of traffic around. It felt kind of, the pace of life was a pace of life that just didn't feel kind of quite natural to us. And so we had this dream, like a lot of people do, of buying a wee bit of land, you know, being self-sufficient and just living more in harmony with the natural world and seasonal cycles and, you know, all that kind of beautiful vision that I think a lot of us have. So we decided to do what I basically describe as everything that your parents tell you not to do, which is 1, quit some steady jobs, and then 2, when we found Limerick, which is where we now live and work today, we basically emptied every single pot of money that we'd ever gathered in our entire lives and put it all in one massive pot.
So that wasn't originally your plan, was it?
No.
You went to buy a much smaller plot of land and then you found this semi-derelict croft in the Highlands.
Yeah, exactly. So the dream was really the quintessential dream life. That sort of, you know, chickens, maybe a few camping spots to pay the bills, you know, diversify a little bit. But really, it was all about growing our own food. So we were looking for 5 acres. We were up in the Cairngorms looking at land. One day we came across this kind of amazing bit of land, which Sandra had actually found online before and had been having all these kind of dreams about, but she'd never told me about it because it was way out of our budget. But it wasn't just way out of our budget, it was 150 acres. So what is that, 15 times bigger?
Yeah.
But you know, whenever your heart makes a decision and then your head's got to catch up with it, that was basically the decision that we had of Limerick. But it wasn't an easy one because, like many people who are wanting to get access to land, it wasn't just about finding land, it was then finding the money to have it. And we didn't have that money. So for the next kind of 6 to 9 months, we blindly put an offer in thinking we've just got to make this happen. And so we had to spend the next 6 to 9 months literally kind of scooping together all that money and kind of going to friends and family with a bit of a begging bowl going, can you help us make this happen? Which amazingly they did. So we ended up at Limerick in March 2016. And that's where I think the real story begins from there.
Absolutely, because you have to explain that you had no farming. I mean, your partner Sandra had a bit of farming background, didn't she? But you had none, apart from the kind of outdoorsy rangering skills you'd picked up. So you had to kind of learn literally on the job.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's fair to say even that Sandra's farming experience was fairly tentative. You know, it was kind of like, she worked with cows once on the back of a horse.
Right, okay,
you know?
yeah.
But so no, none of us had any farming background. And I think what's also probably as important, arguably more important, is that neither of us had any background in running a business. So, you know, you have this dream life, you have this bit of land, yeah, we're going to live there, we're going to earn some money off of it. You know, it's in a really gorgeous but harsh environment. How do you make that happen? And so, so we had to learn all of that from scratch. So everything from, like, there's a bit in the book where I talk about, you know, I just used to think that a cow was a cow and that a sheep was a sheep, but it's not. Because there's all these other names, like for cows, there's steers and stots and heifers and bullocks and bulls. And then for sheep, there's wedders and, I still don't know them all. We don't keep sheep, but you know, the wedders and just, you know, all this different language that we had to learn. And then we had to learn the language of business as well, you know, accounting software. I don't know if anybody's ever used accounting software before, but, you know, I didn't learn accounting software or so it's been a whole new world that we've had to throw ourselves into. Huge learning curve.
And so your guiding principles were the need for sustainability and to have a different life and to live in harmony with nature, weren't they?
Yeah.
So you started off with chickens, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So talk us through that, the first, and that was all about getting eggs and then you started selling the eggs, didn't you?
Yeah.
So how did that, I mean, how did you learn, what were the pitfalls and trials and tribulations you went through with that?
So I think the North Star, maybe there were 2 North Stars. The North Stars were kind of feeding ourselves and, you know, being happy. And that's a kind of a word that's sort of sometimes thrown around, oh yeah, being happy, you know, nobody's really happy. But actually, that's a North Star. So feeding ourselves and being happy. And then as a second North Star kind of created, that was feeding the community and then feeding minds. So those were the kind of the 2 kind of things that kind of evolved. So we started off with, we moved there in March 2016. I described the first day that we arrived there as everything was brown. Okay, so we're 350 metres above sea level. We're on the edge of the Cairngorms National Park. We're facing due south. We're on hill ground. We're at 57 degrees, latitude north. I'm not saying that in the context of, oh, it's so hard where we are, but in context, it's a challenging farming environment. Yeah. So we arrived in March 2016, no money, but started off with a few hens. So got a few hens. We had 3 to begin with, called Rose, Bay and Willow. We had this romantic idea that we would name all of our hens after flowers. So we'd Rose, Bay and Willow, and then we needed herb. And then we had like meadow and sweet and sage and thyme. That eventually kind of dissipated out because we've far too many hens now to name. But we got those 3 hens, and then we thought, let's get more hens because hens are great. We built an honest
different breeds, didn't you, as well?
All
so
different
you had
breeds.
Coloured eggs as well.
Yeah, different coloured eggs. That kind of grew because we thought, well, we'll put an honesty box at the top of the track. When we had 15 hens, yes, a lot of eggs. So we started to sell eggs through the honesty box. Then kind of it got out about word of mouth about, the quality of the eggs because the hens are all on organic feed. We're starting to tell the story of all this kind of work that they're doing. And then that kind of snowballed and snowballed and snowballed. And that's kind of how our egg industry kind of grew. Next animals to follow after that were pigs. So we got 3
Oxford Sandy and Blacks, weren't they?
Yeah, we got 3 Oxford Sandy and Black pigs on, and we always had this kind of like vision that we didn't want the animals. Sandra and I had been going through our own, do we want to eat meat? We'd been living and working in the borders before this, and we were tree planting, really involved in the rewilding movement. As I was saying to you earlier before, we were reading a lot of books by people like George Monbiot, and we were really kind of engaging with a lot of that rhetoric at the time. And so, we'd started to kind of question about, where we get our meat from. So whenever we decided to get our own animals, we sort of thought, we want them to have a purpose. It's not just about meat on the plate. We want them to play a function in this kind of ecosystem that we're now stewards of. So we got these pigs, and the idea was that they would kind of rootle and tootle and snuffle. And yeah, those are all kind of, proper farming terms, by the way. Pigs do rootle, tootle and snuffle. It's how we talk about it in commercial language. And so, we thought, well, that's kind of their superpower. So if we work them through an area, we're planning on planting that area with 320 trees. Well, we've either got to do the work to prepare the ground, or the pigs could do the work. So we got them to work through this area, and then whenever we took them off to the abattoir, we planted the trees in there, and then we could tell
that was a big part of your plan for land, was it, to plant lots and lots of trees? And that was the first thing that actually your first project was the tree planting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
In some harsh conditions.
We've come from a background of, as I said, starting off in conservation, then kind of going into rewilding and seeing really the value of trees. And I think if I'm really honest, coming from a non-farming background, seeing that kind of conflict between trees and farming, I just can't rationalise it in my own head, because I only see benefits to trees, from the shade and the shelter and then the food production element. I only see benefit in trees. So we made a decision that we would actually put a lot of limbrick into woodland quite early on. So we've 150 acres, but over half of that is in some form of new woodland, either planted or natural regeneration. We also grow trees for tree food, so tree fodder, tree hay. I don't know if any of you are
That was fascinating, the tree hay. That was really interesting.
So totally, that came from when I lived and worked in the south of England, and I learned from a guy down there called his name's Ted Green, who's a part of the Ancient Tree Forum. And he used to talk about animals eating tree leaves, like hundreds of years ago. And then fast forward a few years, and I don't know if any of you know Dr. Lindsay Wistons, who works for, where does Lindsay work for? My mind's gone. Thank you very much. And she is absolutely amazing on anything to do with trees and tree hay. So we started to grow copses of trees for tree hay. So we've planted just over 30,000 trees on the croft in the last 6 years.
And it's just the two of you been planting them all, isn't it?
Just the two of us.
Yeah.
We're a bit weird about the tree planting. So we've lots of people that say, I want to come and help you plant a tree. And we're sort of quite protective of it, because planting a tree is as much a kind of a practical process, I think, as it is a spiritual process. So we've been quite kind of, protective of that, because we sort of think, yeah, but you're going to plant it right. I'll just do it. I'll just do it. So that's basically our kind of thought process between why we've planted pretty much all 30,000. And it's interesting trees because, you know, we're now looking at Limbrick at its 150 acres from a sort of a kind of a nature productive, a human productive and a food productive element. So more trees in terms of fruit and nut, that's really a plan of ours going forward too, because they do actually grow in our area. So that's really a sort of a new avenue that we're trying to explore as well.
I was interested to read how you felt that having a non-farming background in a way was quite a benefit, because it allowed you to stand outside and look in and come at things at a completely fresh angle and not be almost prejudiced or not have any preconceptions about what you were doing.
Yeah.
Did you feel that was a really important aspect of your plan?
I think naivety is a wonderful thing. I think on reflection, I think being naive in some ways has been one of our greatest strengths, because we didn't know what was ahead of us. And had we have known what was ahead of us, I don't know how it would have looked differently. But certainly when it came to farming, a lot of what we did, a lot of the decisions that we made were made really from 2 points. One, what's the cheapest way of doing it, because we don't have any money? And two, what's the most obvious way of doing it? What's the easiest way of doing it? And usually the answer to both of those questions is working with nature. It just is. You know, if you work with the natural processes, and it's not one of those kind of like nice things that you say, it's actually business sense as well. But if you actually work with natural processes, because you can't beat them, you know, if you can't beat them, join them. So you work with those natural processes, and then you work with the kind of the basics of humanity, which is be a good person, you know, be nice, be honest, be generous, be giving, be loving, be sharing. And then you kind of combine the two. To me, that is the perfect, I guess, design or model for farming, I would say. But it's different whenever you know, it's different whenever you then dip your toe into that kind of more mainstream commercial world. And, you know, it's interesting. Last year, we had a group of Aberdeenshire farmers. So we're in the Cairngorms, and Aberdeenshire is the county to the east of us, which is big. It's big farming country, big kind of arable country. A lot of money in that kind of area. It's really good farming land. And we had a big group of Aberdeenshire farmers came to visit us, and I was absolutely bricking it, because I just thought, I mean, really, they're just going to, you know, me skipping around and, you know, with my Highland cattle, and, you know, what are they going to think of us? And it was so interesting because they came, they were in the area for a Highland dance weekend, which I loved, because they were all, so they were in fairly good form, they were in fine fettle. But they came to look at what we did at Limbrick, and, you know, the big arable, big dairy farmers all arrived in their kind of Land Rovers and stuff. And they went, at the end, they wouldn't leave, because they just kept talking about how this was the kind of farming that actually they wanted to do. But they were locked into subsidies, they were locked into almost kind of a fertilizer addiction, you know, all these kinds of things, and they just couldn't break it, and they didn't know how to break it. But this little small mixed farm on the edge of the Cairngorms, that totally, you know, floated their boat. So, you know, and that was a farm designed on no farming background.
That's really interesting. I mean, you mentioned quite early on in the book how you discovered the whole concept of regenerative agriculture, which then sort of became the umbrella and your guiding star as to how you then operated with your livestock and the crops and the land. What was it about? Obviously, this is a conference very sort of rooted in regen ag. So what was it about that principle, and how did you discover it, and why was it so important to you as regards to the future of Limbrick?
Yeah, I feel like I'm amongst friends and I can talk about regenerative agriculture here. I don't think it's too controversial, is it?
No.
So I guess whenever we were starting to look into what kind of farmers we were going to become, we were looking for models, of course. And there was only one other person in Scotland at that time who was really doing what we were wanting to do, and it was this little croft over on the west coast of Scotland. It's
actually 4 years ago. Regen ag wasn't talked about to the same extent as it is now.
No.
Still quite.
I mean, we were total kind of, you know, left field hippies really, from what we were kind of looking to do, and so. we started to kind of look into it, and we came across a couple of people. So one was Richard Perkins, who made Ridgedale Permaculture over in Sweden, and we now support Richard in the delivery of one of his training courses. We totally got what he was trying to do, but the other person was Joel Salatin, who I'm just a big. I mean, Joel Salatin's just a guy who you just want to kind of give a big hug to. He's on it. He says it how it is. But he's totally talking sense. And so those were kind of like the sort of the lights in the darkness.
You did his course, didn't you? You spent a bit of time doing the...
No, just reading.
Okay.
Yeah. So I don't really do a lot of... I'm not a big farming reader. I don't read a lot of literature on farming. But Joel's book was one of the ones that I did read. And it just made so much sense. Again, he talked about replicating nature, about, being a good business person by being nice and honest and all that sort of thing. And that's really who we gravitated towards. And they were talking about, alongside Alan Savory, who's obviously the big holistic management guru, they were talking about regenerative agriculture.
That's the course you did, wouldn't you?
We did the holistic management course, exactly. So it was all of those kinds of things that we started to then go, okay, if we're going to pin our hat on anybody, it's going to be this regenerative agriculture movement, because as I say in the book, we didn't really fit the conservation model.
No, I like the fact you don't like the word conservation, do you? Even though you came from a conservation background.
Yeah.
Explain why you didn't like it.
It's just the idea of conserving, to me, screams control. So if we're trying to conserve something, we're kind of trying to control a natural process. Which seems very static, and in its simplistic form. And nature isn't static; it's mobile, it's changing.
As in the way you don't like managing a farm either, do you? You don't talk about managing the land.
No, and Sandra and I sometimes debate that one. She always goes, "Well, I like to talk about management," and I always say it's managing ourselves. We don't manage the land; we manage ourselves and our decisions, which then makes an impact on the land. But we don't actually manage the land. To me, we can't. It's just impossible. We can't manage nature, being an integral part of it, yes, but we can't manage it. And then the other one that we didn't really kind of want to completely kind of align ourselves with was rewilding, even though I think that I think regenerative agriculture and rewilding are really synergistic. I think
you're talking here about rewilding people, not rewilding the land, don't you? Which is
exactly.
It's really interesting.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Certainly up where we are in the Cairngorms, it's all very... Rewilding is, bring back the lynx, bring back the wolves, people, build the wall. Sometimes people will think about it like that when it's not. Rewilding is just simply reconnecting people with nature. That's it. And that's what so many of people who are in regenerative agriculture do, because they reconnect people themselves and then their community with what it is that they're producing. And to me, that's just like amazing.
So can we talk a bit about the financial aspect of it? I mean, we talked earlier about how,
yes.
we had a chat beforehand about how it's quite difficult to balance the commercial needs of the farm when you're actually not driven by commercial, aspects of what you want. That's not part of your dream.
No.
But obviously there are bills to pay, and you've got to make the farm pay for itself. And you started off by, both of you had part-time jobs, so you were trying to balance getting the farm working, getting it up and running, and all the demands that made, as well as bringing in the bill. So how have you made that? How have you made that work?
For sure, and that's one of the most challenging aspects in some ways. I think I was describing before how it's always a bit of a roller coaster. I mean, everything I think in farming is a bit of a roller coaster. It's either whoa, or it's yay, or it's whoa. It's kind of one or the other. And the dream was a little bit of self-sufficiency, enough food to feed ourselves, a little bit of money to pay the bills. It kind of grown and ballooned and mushroomed in all the most wonderful ways ever, because it meant that the story could get out to a bigger audience. But neither of us have been ever commercially driven, as in my focus is not to make bags and bags and bags of money. Our focus has always been to live a good life, to be happy, to be joyful, and to share that and, produce as much abundance as we can. But as we talk about in the book, our kind of lines started to evolve naturally. So Sandra's very good with the animals, she's very good at growing, so she leads on that. I ended up learning about accounting software and started to commercialize elements. So we have a number of different streams of how we earn our income, which to me is the ultimate in farming with nature, because you're replicating nature, which is diverse. So the business is diverse. So we have hens, we have pigs, we have cows, we have bees, we run tours, we run courses, we sell compost, all this kind of thing. So we have sort of commercialised it. And that's been a kind of, it's always a kind of a strange line to kind of walk, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to show that this kind of model is financially viable. Because I think at the end of the day, that's one of the questions about regenerative agriculture. Is it, well, how much food can you produce? And two, is it economically viable? So it's always been a kind of a line that we've trod, and it's always been one that's, again, like the life, has always gone up and down. So like we were talking about earlier, you know, I don't think there'll be a farmer at this conference who isn't experiencing what we're all going through at the minute, which is that, you know, as the media call it, the cost of living crisis. You know, hen feed and pig feed have doubled, especially organic feed, which is getting harder and harder to source. You know, petrol prices are going up. So for a farm like us where we're delivering, yeah, it's really difficult. You know, we run courses, which there's a much slower uptake this year on our, you know, they're called Living Off the Land course. It's all about, you know, learning what we do, but seeing all the kind of the finances behind it and the quality of life. Fewer people are signing up to those. Fewer people, yeah, it's really kind of starting to squeeze. So, you know, the term that a business friend told me was, you have to pivot. So we're constantly looking at ways in which we're having to pivot, but it's quite a weird time at the minute. And so we're kind of at a point where we're like, how do we pivot into this? And that's interesting, I think, for everybody in farming at the minute, because we don't rely on subsidies. We don't take any subsidy payment. So we can't just kind of continue on and go, well, the subsidies will keep coming in. They don't.
No.
So if all of this kind of has a knock-on effect, which it is, you have to pivot. And that's what we try and share with the world.
Which is what you've done from the minute you started with the farm, really, isn't it? Because you've basically been trying out different things and learning different skills. Does it match at all your dream when you jacked in your jobs and moved to the Cairngorms? Does the reality of it match your dreams?
Yeah. See, Fiona asked me this question earlier and I thought, she's going to pull that one out, isn't she? She's going to pull that one out of the bag. The very honest answer is no. It doesn't. It's a funny thing, isn't it, to follow your dream? I mean, it was our dream that we followed. And I'm not saying that it's not our dream, but we didn't know that our dream was going to look like this. And I still think we still have that North Star of kind of that kind of self-sufficiency and that kind of joyful existence, and then that kind of economic viability. We're still not there, you know, because everything is just changing so much. And so that's why I think it's like everything in life. If you just follow one static model, well, nature is not static, it will change around you. So if you just kind of go, I'm just going to keep doing what I always did, eventually it's going to kind of going to break. So I wouldn't say that we're definitely at where we
But
want
you're happy
to
with
be.
your decision, you still would do the same thing again, knowing what you know that it not.
Well, I don't know about that one. Definitely would have bought that lottery ticket. No, I mean, you can't regret anything in life, can you? You know, you've got to make the decisions based on what you've got at the time. And that was a big key thing about getting the book out, you know. That was all about writing the story down and saying, you know,
It's a great story.
Thank you very much. I didn't tell her to say that. But it's all about trying to get that story down with as much honesty as possible. And again, the other thing is that it's an interesting line to tread is, you know, I'm just Lynn and Sandra's just Sandra. And, you know, all of a sudden we're in this kind of audience where you're sharing.
We haven't mentioned the BBC, have we? Because that's obviously, how did that happen? How did that come about? And what was that like?
So we were, well, the story goes is that back in 2017, a friend of ours tagged us on Facebook because there was this programme called This Farming Life, which we'd never heard of. We don't have a TV. And she tagged us on Facebook and I thought, oh, that looks fun. I'll just send a little email. So came back a few days later and Sandra was like, there's a voicemail on the phone from a girl called Kate from the BBC. What's that about? And so then it kind of all spilled out. And what we thought was, could this be an opportunity to, one, talk about regenerative agriculture in mainstream farming, and two, provide an example, a real life example of two people trying to do it from scratch. So nothing too ambitious, really, you know, we're just sort of, we know what we're doing. And that's what we pitched to the BBC. We said, look, we're really interested in this movement called regenerative agriculture. We're really up for it. Also, we're up for growing our own food. And by the way, did you know that there's more than one word for cow? And did you know that there's more than one word for sheep? You know, it was really being honest about the fact that we didn't know anything, and then the whole business side. And so, so lo and behold, that was back in kind of October 2017. New Year 2018, we got a call saying, right, you know, you're in, and we're filming next week. And that was it. And that was the week that we had got 3 of our pigs going off to the abattoir. Never been to an abattoir before, never brought pigs to an abattoir.
Great TV.
Yeah, great TV. And it's, you know, it's classic kind of TV, isn't it? Because obviously I cried, you know, it's quite, it was a, it was quite a kind of a, oh gosh, experience. But the bloody BBC put that on the very start of every single episode. And so, like, if you watch any, so we were in series 3 of This Farming Life, you watch any single episode, you'll see at the start it's all like doodle doodle doo, and then there's just me going, it's like, you bloody rascals. But it was honest. It was honest TV, and I think that's what people said. And I think just staying on the TV kind of bit. You know, they followed us for 9 months. They weren't with us every day, but they'd say, oh, you know, tell us if you're doing anything, you know, interesting, then we'll come film, which you start to moderate because you think, I definitely don't want them there for that. But we tried to be honest as well. Like the first time, obviously, we took pigs to the abattoir. The first time Sandra tried to shear a sheep, which was just mortifying, poor thing. You know, the first time we brought the cows on, the first time we did all this kind of stuff.
You've got the beautiful Highland cattle, haven't you?
The beautiful Highland cattle, yeah.
Very photogenic for TV.
Exactly. But it was 12 episodes, and in the very last episode, really closely towards the end, there's this bit, and I love it. This made it all worthwhile. Sandra's standing in a bit that I call our far field, and she's talking about soil health. And she's going, what we really want to do is improve the health of the soil, you know, for nature. And I thought, that's gone into the living room of, I don't know, some people say that in peak times, Farming Life can get 2 million viewers.
Yeah.
And I thought, that sentence has gone into the living room of 2 million people. If anybody takes anything from us in that programme, that has gone into it, and it's been made accessible. It's not been kind of addressed up as regenerative agriculture, this kind of movement. It's just 2 people trying to do the right thing. And so that, for me, was like, yeah.
Job done.
Job done. That was worth it.
And your book, we're going to have a reading from your book now before we have open to questions. So you're going to talk a bit about, obviously you inherited this croft that had a fantastic history going right back to Culloden and the Highland clearances and amazing history. And then, but you're obviously farming it now to look forward to the future generations and to regenerative agriculture. So do you want to read that bit that you selected out?
So it's a kind of a bit of a back to future, this section. So it's talking about the kind of responsibility that you have as a land steward, and about really learning from people in the past. Because I think whenever we came into farming, I'll be very honest and say that we used to be quite critical of a lot of farming, and we used to be quite critical of a lot of farmers, and we were also critical of the people who lived there before us, the decisions that they made. And I think over the years we've become a lot less critical and a lot more understanding and empathetic, and feeling really that responsibility that you have on your shoulders of trying to look after the land in the best way that you can for not just the health of the land and your animals, but yourself as well. So this kind of harks back to a little bit. By the way, I'm going to read this to you. It's funny, I still don't see myself as an author. I'm like, I just wrote a few words down. It was so. On some level, we started to connect to the previous inhabitants, understanding their hardships, which could have taken a heavy physical and mental toll, but respecting their spirit, still able to smile in the face of relentless adversity and take merriment from the social and cultural connections with the people who surrounded them. As we grew to know them, we felt that their legacy was a part of our future, promising to keep their story alive out of respect for who they were and what they did, and using the lessons we had learned from what they had achieved and how they survived to feed directly into our evolving new model for living at Limbeckcroft in the 21st century. Our instinct was to work the land to provide food not just for ourselves, but for our wider community. all the while ensuring natural diversity could thrive. A way of farming where every decision was taken in the context of working with the land and the environment. And personally, we wanted to build and strengthen our own relationship with nature, drawn to a more hands-on way of working the land. And one of the many reasons we fell in love with the old crofting culture. It was a way of living and working where farming was about producing food within the natural capacity of the land, in rhythm with the changing seasons, when communities worked as large family units, and where loyalty and kinship were thicker than blood alone. But we were conscious to avoid romanticising every element through rose-tinted glasses, and we had no illusions that the old conditions were anything other than harsh. We had no desire to live the original crofters' struggle of centuries before, and in all likelihood would not have been able to endure it. We liked the comforts of modern-day living, a warm house, an electric blanket on a cold night. I love an electric blanket on a cold night. A decent internet connection, a reliable car, and while we saw ourselves as hardier than some, we didn't want to give up all of the benefits that many of us have become used to having. Yet we look back to those days with a huge amount of admiration for the crofter spirit, people who were able to live and survive just by working with what they had in a location and on ground where everything was stacked against them. And it was hard not to feel instinctively drawn to the way the older generation talked about the past, when farming was a community effort, not a one or two man band, and where everyone worked with nature because, again, that is all they had. While their gratitude for modern day efficiencies and appliances shone through, their sorrow for the loss of that kinship was also clear. A bright flame that once burned brightly inside, but that had been reduced to a dull flicker as machines and mechanisation took away from manpower and teamwork. Sometimes it was as if we could now hear the ancestors of the empty ruins calling us to keep the spirit of Limerick alive, something that in our very core we could not ignore.
That's beautiful. I have to say this book, it's published by Chelsea Green and available from the bookstall downstairs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Chelsea Green bookstall. So any questions for Lynn? I think there were some online as well, aren't there, as well? Yeah. Should we go to an online one first, or?
You have a look at the questions
Okay.
and see which ones.
Marvellous. Have we got any live questions first to kick us off?
There's a couple there.
There we go. Yep, gentleman here.
Thank you. Yeah, I might have missed it, but I wondered if you'd had any thoughts or practices or experiences of the old ownership system, as I understand it, in Scotland, was based upon the shields, the communal holding of the land, not an ownership. And I came across a very shocking phrase, which many people have probably heard Farmer-Rama's broadcasts around the history of bread making, but on that programme, I think it was on that programme, they did this analysis of farming, and they described farming as a colonial concept. And I found that very troubling and unsettling. But the more I looked at it, the more there seemed to be historical evidence for that. I wondered if you'd had thoughts about that. Maybe you cover it in your book.
It's not something that I cover in sort of huge detail. We talk about the history of crofting, so specifically crofting in the book, because we are, for those of you that don't know what a croft is a kind of a legally protected designation, for want of a better word, piece of land that basically the protection came out of the Highland clearances. So previous to that, the land ownership, the land tenancy, the land stewardship model would have looked very, very different. And, you know, crofting wasn't just a way of living, it was a culture in itself. And that's what we kind of really refer to in the book. It was this way of living and working the land whereby, yeah, you had your kind of your little share, but really you couldn't survive on that share alone, just you. You had to work. Literally, you had to survive, you had to work as part of a community. And then you would have these large areas of what are called common grazings. So similar in some ways to the commons, you know, down in England. You had this kind of area of grazings whereby people would, you know, say you had 20 people that lived in your township, your crofting township, you know, you would have an area of hillside and you would all work together to have all your cattle up there at one point or whatever. And then that was kind of your area. But a lot of this has come out from the fact that for many, many years previous, the vast majority of Scotland, and really is still today, is owned by a handful of people who in effect, you know, dictate how it's parcelled up, how it's divided, and how it, you know, how it's supposed to look. So I think your point about, you know, it sort of being kind of inherently colonialism, I like to think that crofting is, to some extent, a little bit of a rebellion against that. It's kind of like a little bit of the last bit that's kind of clinging on, that has some truth in it to what original land life in Scotland would have looked like many centuries ago. Don't know. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that.
Nice. One of the online questions, which is something we haven't with the finance, someone's asked did you get any grants to do any of the developments that you did, which I know you did, didn't you? And how did that work?
Yeah, so we don't take subsidy payment, which is the annual payment that a lot of farms take. There's a few reasons to that, but what we have accessed are what I call capital grants. So grants that are there for a project. So planting trees.
You've had to like apply to the Woodland Trust or?
Sure, yeah. So mostly it's been through rural payments. So we've been able to access funding for, you know, planting schemes, for renovating a building, for building a new barn, for putting in fencing.
So for each of those, you have to fill out an application form and put a case forward for
Absolutely,
it.
yeah. So it's been a kind of a grant for a particular project. That has been a complete game changer, game maker for us. Had we not been able to access a lot of those grants, which by the way, the ones that we accessed don't exist anymore. So there was a lot of support for young farmers when we started. There was a lot of support for new entrants. You know, those are both pretty much, you know, not completely, but a lot of that funding has now disappeared.
That's really sad.
If we hadn't have had access to the funding, we wouldn't have this book, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you, and we wouldn't be sharing that story of small-scale regenerative farming. So this funding can be transformational.
It's a really important part to make, I think, isn't it? That,
Absolutely.
New entrants, it's a really
Absolutely.
vital way for you to get into the career.
Yeah.
Another lady's asked about, do you have sheep? Why don't you have sheep? And you do have sheep, don't you? So
No.
Oh, you don't have sheep?
No, we did for about a
That's
year.
right, yeah.
And
They're mentioned in the book, aren't they?
they
Briefly.
kept trying to kill themselves.
Oh,
Let's just leave it at that.
end of story, that, okay.
Yeah. We're cowgirls, I don't know.
Excellent.
Sorry.
Any more question, though? Gentleman in the middle.
Yeah, I'm probably okay just to...
Yeah, go on ahead, holler at me.
So a couple of things I'm interested in, how you measure your soil health. Thanks. Yeah, so soil health and also the tree hay. Is that mentioned in the book, or can you say a bit more about that for us, please?
Yeah, so in terms of soil health, a lot of it, if I'm very honest, has been just done on visual monitoring. So we monitoring on above ground. So how's the vegetation doing? How's it changing? How's it, you know, evolving? And below ground, I'm a big fan of digging a pit and counting worms. Literally that kind of simple. So a lot of it has been just visual monitoring of soils. We did do a survey, not a soil survey, but we did do a survey of the vegetation. So that was back whenever we moved there in 2016. And that's a baseline, and it was an NVC survey, so a National Vegetation Classification survey. So what we wanted to do to see was have a baseline and see if over 5, 10, it'll probably be 10 years, our grazing of cattle and hens in particular will increase the diversity of what it is that we're looking for. So that's kind of how we monitor that. In terms of tree hay, so we do talk about it in the book a little bit. So tree hay is something that we cut every year. So we cut species of what we have naturally available growing on the croft in abundance, which is primarily birch with a little bit of alder, a little bit of willow, and the occasional bit of ash as well. Traditionally, a lot of tree hay was things like ash and hazel, but we don't have an awful lot of that. And we'll cut it in the summer. So the same time you would kind of cut grass hay when it's at its peak, we cut branches from the trees. We bundle them up and then we dry them in the barn. And then in the wintertime, we feed them out as a supplement to the cattle. So it's not as a, you know, we're never kind of thinking, oh, they're only ever going to eat tree leaves in their, you know, but it's a supplement because tree leaves have got different minerals and nutrients that grass grass simply doesn't. So it's to provide that kind of supplement to try and reduce any deficiencies in the cattle. Our plan going forward is to increase the amount of tree hay that we give out to the cattle. So we've planted copses of tree hay. So we've basically planted tree hay crops. So we've planted 10 in an area where there really wasn't much else kind of going on. We planted these 10 crops of about 300, about 300 trees in each copse, and the plan is to manage them on a rotation. So every year we go in and we harvest 2, so we've got a 5-year rotation, and then that is something that we can increase our production of tree hay in the long term. But we do talk a little bit more about it in our book. There was a talk done in, I think it was the 2019 conference by Lindsay Wistons here at the Oxford Real Farming Conference. It's about a 20-minute talk on tree hay and silvopasture. I fully recommend watching that. It's absolutely brilliant.
Fantastic.
You're welcome.
Lady in the corner.
Hello. Right, sorry, just checking.
Hello.
I thank you very much, Lynn. This
You're
is very
very welcome.
interesting.
Thank you.
My name's Rachel Durrant, and I have been listening to you talk and trying to think about your 7 years, if it is roughly, of your wild farming life as an enterprise, and sort of been thinking about how to sort of open up your account. What I want to ask you to do is, could you open up your accounting ledger and talk a little bit about what have been the most important sources of income. And I sort of have written, I've noted down, you know, you've produced a book, a TV series, you run courses, you've taken grants, you presumably have made sales of meat and eggs.
Yep.
And I don't know, you suggested you didn't have any savings or investments left after the initial.
No.
So I was wondering if you could just, engage in some sort of full transparency.
Let me just get my online banking up for you. And
Thank you.
No.
You from the Inland Revenue?
No, it's all right. We've got an accountant. So I'll try and be as honest and as succinct as I possibly can in this context.
Got a couple of minutes left.
Right, okay. No, because this is sort of one of the reasons why we decided to write our course, was because we were getting a lot of people wanting to come and say, I want to do this, I want to do that, I want to do this, I want to do that. And we wanted to be able to share our learning in that, but also the financial reality. So the way that I see it is that our core enterprises are our food generating enterprises. And that's partly commercial, partly non-commercial. So one side is the food that we produce for ourselves. So that's really core because it doesn't appear on the accounting spreadsheet, but the amount of food that we grow for ourselves is worth thousands of pounds every year. Okay, so we've got that element. Then we've got our commercial enterprises, so our pasture beef, our rare breed pigs, our pork, our pastured eggs, and then our honey. So those are the 4 kind of core commercial enterprises. We always say, and that's, very honestly, it's getting more and more challenging in today's climate, but we always say that we don't run any enterprises that don't run at a profit. So that's the first thing. So every single enterprise, so the hens, the eggs, the pork, the beef, the honey they're all profitable enterprises. One of the ways, say for example, that we managed to make the pork a profitable enterprise is that we decided to install a butchery on site. So we got a funding, and it was a loan, not a grant, from the Organic Research Centre. It was a 5-year interest-free loan, and what it enabled to do was to put in a butchery that meant that we could then do a lot of the butchery of our own animals ourselves, but we could also go into added value produce. So we could turn pork belly into streaky bacon. So that meant that we could make a relatively small value of produce start to maximise. So you've got this core element here, which is of the meat, the beef, the eggs, the pork and the honey. It then starts to mushroom out. So you've got the butchery, which is an additional diversification of it. You then start to add other things around it, which are things like tours and courses. So we start to then go, look, everybody, at the work that we're doing. It's all around this kind of core. It's like a daisy. It's all around this kind of core element, but we're now doing tours and courses. That's diversifying, maximising even more the value of our pork, our beef, our eggs and our honey. but it's all that foundation. Then yeah, we did TV. No money on TV. No, I mean, you know.
They don't pay.
No, really don't. And then sort of, you know, the book. My editor's here, so yeah, we're making loads of money. Write books from Chelsea Green. No, but it's all blossoming out from that diversification, and that's how we try to look at what to me is fully farming with nature. It's about that your kind of base production methods of your food, and then we produce the amount that we believe produce within the capacity of our land. So how can we then expand that out and make it even greater financially viable so that we can, you know, both work there? So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I mean, I haven't kind of broken you down the exact figures, but that's how we try to run it. You're welcome.
That's all we've got time for.
Okay.
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you. Really.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's brilliant.
Thank you very much.